In this quick tutorial, we'll be diving into the world of pagination in Mongoose. If you're looking for a simple and effective way to handle large datasets in your Nodejs application, stick around and let's get started. The output is going to look something like this, where we have the returned data based on our query, page and limit passed, and then we're going to have some extra information about the total number of documents, the total pages, the count of documents returned, and so on. Here we have an express application where we have only one API of type get, which is going to return all of our videos. It calls a service where I have one function which calls the find method on our Mongoose model, which is going to return all of our documents. Also, please take care that I'm not using best practices at all here. It's just to show you the pagination. So I just have the Mongoose schema here. I'm assuming that we have a YouTube database where we have a videos collection. Those are the fields: name, image, URL, description, and so on. And then we have the service in which we're just fetching all documents. The server is running on port 3000, and then I'm connecting to my local database. So let's take a look. Let's call our API. And as you can see, we got all of our documents. Now I only have 15 documents in my database, but let's see how we can paginate that data. When we are talking about pagination, there are two very important fields that we always see in our URL as query parameters, which are the page, which is the page number, and then we also have the limit, which specifies the number of documents that we want or that we are asking for. So for example, when we have page 1 and limit 5, we're saying that we are asking for the first 5 documents in our database, for example. Of course, now if we hit send, nothing is going to take effect because, as you can see, we have all the documents still because we haven't done anything in our code yet. So let's go ahead and fix that. Back in our service, in our getVideos function, instead of doing .find and fetching all of our documents, we now need to specify the limit and the page. Thankfully, we have a method called limit, but we do not have anything called .page. Well, we have something called skip. Let's think about that for a moment. Usually we specify the page and the limit. Let's suppose we had page equal 2, which means that we need to start counting from the second page, meaning we are skipping the first page. But how many elements are we skipping? Well, the limit. If we take a look at our limit is 5. When we see page 2, limit 5, it means that every page has a number of items, which is 5 in this case. Meaning we skipped the first 5 elements because the page is 2 and the first page was 1. So page 1 had 5 elements, and now the second page has also 5 elements starting from element 6. So technically, also if you take a look at this method, it specifies the number of documents to skip. That's the parameter we pass here. So if we had 5, for example, and then we had limit 5, this means that we are skipping the first 5 elements, and then after skipping the first 5 elements, we're retrieving the next 5 elements, meaning page 2, and then we're retrieving 5 elements. Of course, we need this to be dynamic. So how do we do that? Well, the calculation is very simple. We have the page and the limit. All we have to do is just multiply the page with the limit. So here we would do page times limit. However, here we have two cases. If our page starts from index 0, then the skip would make sense, because if we had page 0, for example, we don't want to skip anything. So here it should be 0. And page 0, meaning 0 times anything, would be 0, meaning we don't skip anything and we just retrieve the first elements here, the first 5. But if our page starts from 1, then what do we have? We have a problem here. Because if we say page 1 limit 5 and then we are skipping page 1 times 5, then we are skipping the first 5 elements. However, we're still in page 1, so we don't need to skip anything. So if you're starting from page 1, you need to do this page minus 1. And this makes sense because if we're in the first page, meaning we don't need to skip anything, then 1 minus 1, which is 0, multiplied by anything isn't going to skip anything. We're just fetching the first few elements, which is what we want. If page was 2, for example, okay, So we are skipping the first 5 elements, which are from page 1, then 2 minus 1, which is 1, times limit 1 times 5, which is 5, is going to skip the first 5 elements and then retrieve the next 5 elements starting from element number 6, which is page 2 actually. So keep in mind, if you're starting from page index 1, which is the first page, we have to do page minus 1 times the limit. We need to skip that number of items. However, if your page starts from index 0, so page 0 is your first page, then you just have page times limit. And of course here the limit as well needs to be dynamic. So here we need to have page and limit as parameters, and then of course we need to path them here, page limit, and then we need to get those from our request from the query. And to achieve that in Express, we just say const page query for page limit equal rec.query. This, by the way, is the same as saying const page equal rec.query.page and then const limit equal rec.query.limit. This is the same, it's just a faster way of writing it. Of course, these two variables, these two names, should be actually present in our query or it is going to get us undefined. Now let's make sure that it's working. If we do page, then we also log the limit. Okay, if we hit send, if we take a look here, we get 1, 5, 1 meaning the page is 1 and then the limit 5. And if we take a look at our result, we're no longer getting 15 videos, we're just getting 5. Video 1, video 2, up until video 5. Because the page is 1, meaning the first page, and then the limit is 5. We could change the limit to 3, for example. If we hit send now, it's going to get us the first 3 only. Now if we say page 2, for example, and limit 3, is going to skip the first 3 elements because those are for page 1, and it's going to start from video 4, video 5, video 6. And as you can see, after hitting send, we got video 4, 5, and 6. This is the most basic way of doing pagination in Mongoose. However, there's a better way of doing it if you want to also return more data or more information, such as the total number of documents, because this does not tell us how many documents we have in our database. So it would be good if we could know how many pages we have based on the number of limit we pass and the total number of documents we have in our database, so that the data returned is more meaningful and the client can also know what to expect. Now before doing that, it would be a good practice if you have default values here, so that in our case, if the client does not pass any query parameters and we hit send, we have a default number set in place. So now, for example, we didn't specify in our query which page and which limit we need, so we still got the first 5 because in our code we just set some default properties here. Of course, we can also add validation and so on in our code, so that, for example, you cannot pass here a page under page 1. For example, you can't pass page 0 or a negative integer here. Of course, you can do that with Joy validation or any other validation package, but it's not in this video scope. Now let's see how we can do that in a better way, using something called aggregation. Let's take a look here. An aggregation in MongoDB is a way of processing a large number of documents in a collection by means of passing them through different stages. The stages make up what is known as a pipeline. So basically, we can do filtering, sorting, grouping, we can reshape the documents, we can do anything we want. Of course, the order of the pipes affect the data that we get. Let's take a look at how we do that. Now, instead of doing .find, we can actually do .aggregate, which takes an array of stages, just like we talked previously. And every stage is put between curly braces and starts with a $sign. The most basic stage is match. So for example, if we had $match, we can specify our conditions. So for example, we can say name Billy. What this does is it's going to return an array of documents from our database, from the videos collection, where the field called name has a value of Billy. That's a very basic example, but just like we have a $match stage, we also have skip and limit, just like we've seen before. And both those stages, the skip and the limit, take a number, just like before. So here we're gonna say limit in the limit stage, and in the skip we're gonna say page -1. Again, we're adding this -1 because we're starting from index 1 and not from index 0. So whenever we're calling the first page, we don't need to skip anything. So here we need to have a 0. 1 minus 1 is going to give us a 0. Okay, times limit. Now page and limit should have numbers here, so those should be numbers. By default, the query parameters are of type string, so we need to just specify here number for both of those variables. Now if we save and go back here and hit send, as you can see, we still have the same output just like before, but this time we're using stages. Now let's take advantage of the aggregation and the stages to have a better shaped response where we can show more details in our output, showing maybe the total count, total document count, total pages, and so on. And just like we've seen, the stages here, the order of the stages matters because it runs from the top to the bottom, one after the other. Now I want to introduce a new stage called facet, $facet. And what this stage does is it allows you to run multiple aggregations in parallel at the same time. So here, for example, when we say .aggregate, we're having an array of stages happening one after the other. In facet, we can run other aggregations. It's also an array of stages, multiple ones, but in parallel. Let's see how that works. But also what you need to know about facet is that it takes any output it receives. So if we had a match here, for example, again, and then we had any condition here, it doesn't matter. The facet, just like we said previously, in an aggregation, the stages go from top to bottom in an orderly way, so the output is passed, So what happens in facet is it's going to take that output, and then we said we have parallel aggregations running at the same time. Each aggregation is going to take that same output and then do something with it. So let's see what we can do. I'm just gonna keep this like that, although match with an open close curly braces is just the same as removing it. It's going to return all the documents from our database, but I'm gonna keep it just so you remember that in facet, every aggregation that is running is gonna take the same output here. So here we need to specify the field names. For example, we can say metadata, and it's going to take an array because it's an aggregation, just like this one here. It's going to take an array of stages. And then, just like we said previously, we can have multiple aggregations running at the same time. Each is going to have a different output. So for example, this aggregation is going to be in metadata, inside of metadata. And then we can have data, which is also a second aggregation running in parallel. Those two will run at the same time on the same data set, which is the output of the stages, or stage in this case, before that facet stage. If you're a bit confused, stick with me, it's gonna get clear, don't worry. So here what we can do is, for example, inside of metadata, we can start with the first stage. We can use count, and then inside of count, we can specify the field name. Count is going to count the number of documents that we have up until this point. So in this case, all of our documents, because the match is getting everything, because it's an open curly braces. So here we can call this total documents, for example. If we save that, and before running it, let's take the skip and the limit stages and put them in this aggregation running in parallel with metadata, but this time this will be inside data. So what we're doing is we're taking all the documents, we're running the first aggregation here, we are getting the count, the number of documents that we have received, which is going to be 15 because we have 15 documents here in our database, and then we're going to set it in a variable called totalDocuments. And then the second output, which is running on the same data set, which is those 15 documents from our match, we are going to do the skip and the limit to paginate the data so that we don't get all of the data, and we're going to set it inside of data, the variable data. So now if we go to Postman and hit send, as you can see, we have the two fields coming from the two different aggregations, metadata, which is showing the total number of documents in our database, and then the data, which only has 3 documents because our limit is 3 and the page is 3, so it skipped the first 6 elements and it started from element 7, which has video 7, so that's perfect for now. Now let's go ahead and add some more meaningful data inside of our metadata. So other than count, we can also use add fields, which is going to add some new fields. For example, we can add page number, which is simply just going to be the page that the user is going to input. So if we save that, for example, now, here the page is 3. So now if you hit send, as you can see in our metadata, we have the total documents 15, meaning we have 15 items in our database, and then the page number is 3, meaning that those elements here, whatever is inside of data, is from page 3. That's more meaningful. Of course, this value is already with the client, but it's still good to return it in our response. Now let's also return the total number of pages in our database. But how do we do that? Well, it's simple. We have the total number of documents and we have the limit that the user passes. So looking at the limit 3, this means that every page has 3 items. So to get the total number of pages, we can do 15 divided by 3, which is going to be 5. So in this case, if each page has a limit of 3, then we're going to have a total number of 5 pages. Let's do that here. So of course, we also need to add that inside of add fields. We need to add another field, total pages, for example. And then here we can pass in an expression. There's something called divide, which takes an array of 2 values. The first number, which is going to be divided by the second number. So here what we can do is, we can take the total documents. Now here, if we are referring to a variable that we set, to be able to refer to that, we need to pass in a $sign. So total documents. This is going to get the value from the total documents field that we have added, meaning the total document field here, when we pass the $sign, is going to read this 15, which is the value. And then the second item of this array is going to be whatever we're dividing it by. So here it should be the limit, just like we said. If you go ahead and save that, if we send, as you can see, the total pages is 5, which is correct. Now what if we had a limit of 4, for example? If we send, we're gonna see it's gonna show a decimal number, 3.75, but in reality it should be 4 pages. So what can we do? Well, here for dividing, we can add an operator. Also, operator starts with $. Also, by the way, divide is an operator, it's not a stage, it's an operator. But match is a stage, facet is a stage, skip and limit are both stages. But for example, divide and seal are operators. You can read more about stages and operators in the documentation in MongoDB. But now what we need to do is, we need to add the curly braces here. Okay, so now instead of having 3.75, if we send, we're gonna get 4, which is correct. Now let's fix the output, because we have an array, and then inside of that array we have metadata, which also has an array because it's an aggregation. So let's fix that. Let's put that in a variable. Let's call it result, and this is, let's await for this. And then here, if we say return result of 0, this is only gonna get us rid of this array here. So if we hit send, it's gonna be an object now, but we still have the metadata being an array. And we also can add one more thing here, which I think would be good, which is count or documents, which refers to the number of documents that we have received. Now you might think this is the same at the limit, since if we say limit 4, then we need to get 4 elements. But what if it's the final page and it only has 1 element? Then the count should be 1. Either way, it's a good thing to add, it's a good information to have. So here, instead of just returning this, we can just say result equal result of 0, and this shouldn't be a constant anymore because we're changing the value now. And metadata, since it's an array, we can fix that now. We can say result dot metadata equal, and then here we can destruct result dot metadata of 0. So what this does is it's actually getting those, and then it's adding them into metadata. So now metadata is no longer an array, but it's an object having those 3 different fields here. And then we can add a 4th field, which is count, for example, which is going to be the result.data.length, which is the length of this array, meaning the number of documents that we retrieved. So now, if we return this, return result, and we save, if we hit send, as you can see, now it's way more clear. Metadata, we have total documents in our database 15, the page number is 3, that's the current page number, the total number of pages is 4, so now the client knows when to stop calling our API, and the count of data that we retrieved is also 4. Now I'm gonna go ahead and add an extra document in my database, say video 16, insert, let's say our limit is 4, so we have 4 pages, send, as you can see, but let's say our limit was 5, and then I'm at page 3. If we hit send, if we take a look, we can see that we have total pages of 4, so I can go to page 4. If my limit is 5 and we hit send, as you can see, count is 1 and it's not 3 because we only got 1 element. I just wanted to show you the point of the count. If you're new to aggregations, I highly recommend you check them out because you can do a lot with them in Mongoose. It's very important. You can go to MongoDB documentation and read about them. They're very helpful. If this video was helpful to you and it helped you out, please subscribe, leave a like. And if you have any video ideas for the future, please let me know down in the comments. Thank you and see you next time.